something that I see a lot of the time in my day-to-day work is just that individuals are sort of engaging in the first time in this context, which is great. Obviously, when I'm sort of talking to someone and they're saying, well, this is my first time speaking in this context, I'm glad. I'm glad that we're sort of having that opportunity to speak now, because this person may never have had that opportunity to speak in kind of a safe and comfortable environment. So obviously that's a great thing, but a lot of these people who are noticing that they're struggling, they can't necessarily pinpoint specific things that they're going on. They just notice themselves. They're just not feeling themselves. So that's great. That's some good initial awareness. And I think that sort of knowing that something's wrong is really great. And I think that with our service and sort of mental health being less stigmatized, there's more people who are willing to reach out for a bit of support. And we can build on some of these early things. So a lot of people will say that they sort of don't know what's happening, or they can't really pinpoint something, but they're feeling a little bit off. Generally, they do know, and it's just about having that conversation. I guess sort of the point that I'm making out of this is that when we are struggling, the most important thing obviously is to reach out, but it doesn't necessarily have to be really big things. Now, it can be, obviously, like I said, it could be a relationship trouble, or it could be, sort of some anxiety, some stress. But it might just be a build-up of little things. And certainly it's sort of not obviously a requirement that you need to have this big thing that's happened in your life kind of thing. It's often, more often than not, a combination of things. Like it might be going through a bit of a transition at work. There might be a bit of stress just at home, and these things combine, obviously, and unfortunately can put us into a pretty difficult space. And certainly that's what we're here for at TIACS. We're here to be that person on the other end, to lend that ear, to provide that opportunity to just let some of that load off. We can walk around with this big weight on our shoulders, especially if we're sort of holding everything in. And even just the simple act of speaking about it is a way to ease that weight and allow us to be able to function a little bit more.
Kurt, do you find that people are calling you and almost apologising because they don't feel that they're dealing with anything too big, but they just know that things aren't right and they're not sleeping well and that kind of stuff, and they're almost saying, oh, look, I'm not quite sure, I'm calling you.
Exactly.
It's not like it's a really big drama, but still things aren't tickety-boo. So just
exactly,
having that conversation to give them permission that it's still worth acknowledging. It's a pathway to actually, being able to deal with it before it becomes a really big thing.
Exactly. And that's generally exactly how I'll approach a situation. So a lot of people will sort of say, oh, there's people out there that need it more, or this isn't a big deal. And I'll say, look, comparing ourselves to others, there's always going to be someone worse off. Look at yourself. And if you're struggling, I'm here. It's such a hard thing to call up. And I often say to people that making that first step and actually calling up someone like myself could actually be the hardest step in the whole process. And I think that a lot of people really can resonate with that, because I'm often met with, it was really, really hard to make that initial call, especially for someone who hasn't engaged in this process before. This process of engaging in sort of mental health support is something that I think people, are open to and they want to do it, but there's a lot of uncertainty with what that entails. And I think that really the biggest thing is you want to have that sort of connection and feel comfortable with someone talking, obviously. So for me, I want to make it as comfortable a place as I can. And certainly I'm not going to be able to do that 100% of the time, but it's pretty difficult to allow someone to open up if they're sort of not feeling overly comfortable in that space. But basically, long story short, certainly a lot of people, I'd say almost every day or every second day, I have someone who says, look, I'm sure there's someone worse off, or I don't think I've, got that big of a problem, but I feel off. I'm like, you feel off, you've called, let's go with it, kind of thing. So I just want to pause this for again there and just see if anyone has anything that they would like to ask, add, anything like that.
I think we can play the comparison Olympics. I reckon it's a really human thing to do that, to just actually belittle your problems, because you can always, as you said, you can always find somebody who's worse off, and you can feel like you're making mountains out of molehills. But yeah, it's everybody's hardship is their own hardship, and everybody has different responses to trauma and stress and those kinds of things. So yeah, it's not the comparison Olympics at all.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head there. You know, everyone lives a different life and has different experiences through their life. You know, me comparing myself to anyone here, we've all lived extremely individual existences, and for me to compare the position I'm in to anyone here is a disservice to myself, essentially. And I think that it's really easy for me to sort of say that now, but I think a lot of people do experience that. It's that comparing, and certainly I think, you know, conversely, it's important to remind ourselves of that fact that we are a very, very unique individual. And of course, we have similarities with others, but our upbringing, where we are and who we are and how we've got to this point is obviously an extremely individual thing. So, yeah.
I think like in our industry, like I'm glad social media wasn't huge when I had all my problems probably from 2008, 2012 around then. And I think it can be very hard for builders because, well, for everyone, but like builders, people come to us to build their home. Like we often get into it from a tradie background, and then the business just keeps growing and growing, and then it just builds and builds and builds. You're taking on more contracts, you're dealing with more money, and the stress just keeps growing and growing. And I know back when I was dealing with a lot of stuff, like I just felt that I'd let everybody down so much, because like I was a great builder, I could build a good product, but the business side of things was just an absolute shit show. On face value of it, like everyone thought we were killing it. It was that pressure that just kept building and building and building on me. Like I said, look, even back in the day, if TIACS had been around, I don't know if I would have had the guts to make the phone call. So yeah, it's hard to put your hand up, I think, sometimes. And but one thing I've really learned over the last 10 years is that we're all dealing with the same thing. And yeah, having the conversation is incredibly powerful. Like conversations is what's ultimately got me to where I am now.